This active listening seminar and inviting Dr. Lewis to be with us to share and lead. We know it's important to learn the art of listening. Listening is an art. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't have it, so we can develop it. Something that we learn. It's like the other day I went out to dinner with some friends, and I realized we were about 6 of us out for dinner. And from the beginning till the end, 2 people just kept talking. Didn't give us an opportunity to say anything or to ask anything. They just kept talking. And we come across people who know the art of talking but don't know the art of listening. And it's important in any relationships, especially in our relationship with God. A lot of times we do a lot of talking to God, but we don't listen to Him enough. We know the story of Samuel, right? When God called him, he didn't know it was the Lord speaking to him. So someone had to guide him. And so someone needs to help us sometimes when we do not know the art of listening. Hey, you need to stop talking and maybe take a break and listen to others, listen to God. Because in discerning what God's will is for us, we need to be listening. If you don't listen, we don't discern. In discernment, listening is an important component. So I'm hoping and praying that this seminar helps all of us to learn about the art of listening and how important it is for us and for others in our lives and around us, that we listen attentively, so that we get to know other stories, we get to hear God's voice. So let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you today for bringing us in your presence for this seminar on active listening. Help us all to learn the art of listening. First of all, to listen to you, to listen to those around us. Because if we do not listen, we don't get to know who they are and what they go through in life. And if we do not know what people are going through in life, then we will not be able to reach out to them and to help them and lift them up. So we ask you, Lord, to send us your Spirit. Give us a heart that is open and willing to learn the art of listening. Mother Mary, be with us, for you knew the art of listening. You listened to the angel Gabriel, and you kept listening to the voice of God all through your life. Teach us, like you, to listen to the Lord and to listen to others. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and in the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father Angelos, and good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Walgenbach. I direct the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace at the Diocese of Orange at the Pastoral Center. And I'm pleased to introduce our speaker. I want to give by way of introduction as well. As many of you know, we're facing a lot of challenges in California right now around the question of abortion and around the question of our advocacy efforts. And so this morning is not going to be about those things, but I do want to encourage you as we talk about this effort, which is thanks to Noreen and her team for putting this on, the Respect Life group, and Walking with Moms in Need, is that we have this enormous pastoral challenge to make sure that we're accompanying every woman who is pregnant, every woman who's pregnant and struggling or in crisis or in need. And we want to do everything we can to listen, to respond very tangibly and concretely. We're also doing a lot of advocacy, and if you're interested in those efforts, you can go to cacatholic.org, cacatholic.org, and sign up for the Legislative Network, or talk to the folks on the team here or my office, but I did want to mention that. Walking with Moms in Need is a national program from our bishops, giving tools and resources to local parishes to get just more deeply involved into these efforts. We've been doing these things. You do these things as a parish. You reach out to people in need. You provide meals. This is not a new thing of Walking with Moms, but we're wanting to become better at it and become better organized as a parish and become more welcoming and loving to women who are in crisis pregnancy. So I really appreciate the team here putting forward this effort, and I appreciate Dr. Dunn coming. Father Angelos gave us a great why at the beginning. We can't help people if we don't know who they are, what they're going through, what they need, if we don't listen. So Dr. Louise, I've had the privilege of working with her for the past 10 years I've been in this office, because she has been at Crystal Cathedral and now Christ Cathedral for over 20 years, working in the New Hope Crisis Counseling Hotline ministry, training the folks who answer those calls and respond to those needs, helping people to learn how to listen. She has a BA in psychology, a master's in education in counseling, a doctor of ministry in spiritual formation, and another spiritual formation degree. Really broad range of experience. She's done talks at the mental health conferences we've done, mental health ministry conferences with Saddleback and with the County of Orange. And I've had the privilege of working with her and others at the diocese, and Bishop Van and other colleagues in our offices around mental health response, on a domestic violence commission to work on increasing the visibility of our domestic violence awareness and response. She's done work around religious behavioral health training for religious leaders. So I could go on, but I did want you to know this is not her first rodeo, as she would put it. And she's been doing training and working with groups around this topic, especially of great expertise for many, many years. And so we're privileged to have Dr. Louise Dunn. Welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I finally got out after the pandemic. It's my first, really my first presentation off campus, as we call the Christ Cathedral. And active listening is something I kind of live and breathe. I really believe in it. What I love about it is it can be used anytime, anywhere, with anyone. And I'm always promoting it. And today you're going to get 3 hours of a 32-hour training program that the counselors up at the New Hope Crisis Center to become counselors, they go through that. But I've spoken to a lot of groups with 3-hour kinds of presentations, because they're these tips, if you will, that you can take away and use in everyday life. And certainly for those folks here who are going to be doing the Walking with Moms, that's really important. I'm sure that some of you have been around pregnant women, and you know they go through a lot of emotions. And when you really need to listen to someone, it's important to have those tips on what to say, what not to say, and mostly, as Father was saying, listening. And listening to God is a big part of it as well. So starting out, just move. These are some of the components of active listening. Excuse me, got a little hoarse. We start with what we call asking open questions. And an open question is simply something you cannot answer yes or no. Closed question can also be something like, what's your name? Hopefully you're only going to give one name. But if I were to ask you, do you like being here? That is a yes or no question. You say, oh yes, it's beautiful here, really like it. Much better question would be, what do you think about this beautiful sanctuary? What do you think about this beautiful campus here? That gives a person an opportunity to speak a lot more, give a lot more information, but also gives them a point of reference of, what is it you want me to talk about? Anybody in here ever watch a talk show? Ever watch Ellen or Oprah or any of the night talk shows? They have a lot of guests on. They have a lot of celebrities that come on. And it drives me crazy. I do have to say one thing: when you get really good at active listening, when people aren't doing active listening, it can be very frustrating. But the typical thing is they come and they'll say something like, oh, gosh, you're a relatively new actress. I understand that you have a new movie coming out, and Robert Duvall's in the movie. What is he like? Is he nice to work with? Do you learn a lot from him? Are you enjoying this? And the poor person, what do? They sit there and they look, and it's like, what question do you want me to answer? You just threw 4 questions at me. All they have to do is say, tell me about your new movie coming out. And the person's going to give you all the highlights. They're going to give you all the good stuff, and more concise than trying to answer 4 or 5 questions. But I guarantee you, the next time you're watching a talk show, you're going to see the host doing that. And really what we want to do is we want to know what's going on with the person that we're talking to. We don't want to be interrogating people. And when we ask a person one question after another, closed questions, it's like an interrogation. So what we want to do is start with the open question. The next thing that we want to do is we want to get in touch with what the person is feeling. Now, feelings are tremendously important. Emotions are important because that's how we connect as human beings. If we just walk around with wooden faces and you say to a person, how are you? And sometimes we fall into that, fine, fine. How are you? Fine. How was your weekend? Fine. We're not making any kind of a connection. We're not making any kind of a relationship. But when we say to somebody, tell me what you did this weekend. And they this weekend was really great. I got to see my grandkids. I got to see this. I got to do that. They share with us, which gives us common things. All of us have certain things that are in common with each other. And, they might say, oh, the weather was so beautiful. My family went to, we did a picnic down at the park, and it was really lovely. That's where we start to actually have conversation. We are actually connecting with the person, and we're learning a lot more about the person. When we ask a single question and they just give us a single answer, we don't know anything more about them than we did before we got together. So that's the next one that's important. I must have a funny ear. This doesn't want to stay on there. Keeps bouncing off. Summarizing. Now you say, summarizing, it's not too exciting. What we talk about when we're summarizing, when someone tells us a lot of information, we need to stop, take a moment, and go back and make sure that we are hearing what they're telling us. It's really easy if somebody gives us a lot of information to get things mixed up or to not hear them right. And so the summarizing that we're doing is kind of checking back with the person. Okay, from what you were telling me, you have a 4-year-old son, you have an 8-year-old daughter, and you're 8 months pregnant right now. And the person, rolls their eyes, and you got my daughter mixed up with my son, and it's not 8 months with the baby, it's only 7, and those details are really important to people when we're communicating. They may not seem like a big deal to us, 7, 8, 6, 5, but to the individual, those things really matter. Setting boundaries. And we'll talk about that a little more depth. Sometimes we really have to set boundaries. All of you in this room, I would put you in the category as helping people. And people that like to help people can sometimes get to a place where they're not taking care of themselves, They're trying to do more hours of work than are really good for them. So the first person we have to set a boundary with is ourselves. Not easy to do, but we have to keep that consciousness of, if I take on one more thing, can I really handle this? Do I really want to do this? Is this really going to be a good thing? And secondly, in order to keep our boundaries, we have to keep boundaries with other people. And quite honestly, our families are the first people we have to set boundaries with. That can be very difficult. And someone says, I really need you to come over and give me a hand this weekend. This such and such is coming up. You've got to come on Saturday. And the person says, well, wait a minute. I've already made plans with the family. We've already got commitments. You don't want to break one commitment to make another commitment. And it becomes important that we have to determine what is our boundary. What is it that is the next right thing to do, really, rather than are we going to be persuaded by somebody because they're really good at persuading us and getting us to say yes. Giving immediate feedback, that's something that's important too. When we're talking with someone, to right away give feedback. One of the worst communication things that I see at New Hope, the biggest issues that we see are relationship issues. And sometimes, if you're on the phones, you get the feeling that, does anybody get along with anybody? I've today, got one person who's complaining about their neighbor, another one who's complaining about their mom, another one who's complaining about her brother, another one who's complaining about her aunt. It's like, where's the breakdown in communication? And a lot of times it comes with that, we let things store up. Small things. You start out with something that, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to say anything about it because it's really not that important. It's really not bothering me that much. But, the 25th time somebody does it, the tendency is we give them the whole load of the irritation. For goodness sakes, can't you pick up your clothes? Can't you, when you're putting your clothes in the hamper, can't you make sure that you get them in the hamper? Or why is it you don't even put them in the hamper? I'm not going to wash your clothes anymore if you don't put them in the hamper, And all of a sudden the other person's going, what's the big deal? If that was bothering you, why didn't you tell me? So we always want to let somebody know what we really are thinking in a kind way. We'll talk more about that. And then finally, brainstorming. Brainstorming is really important. How many of you really love to have people tell you what to do all the time? How many of you, can I see a show of hands? Please give me advice every day, every single day. Please tell me what to do. Please tell me where I should be, who I should be with, what color I should be wearing, if I'm a winter or a spring, all these things. Reality, no, we do not like to be told what to do. We do not like advice constantly coming at us. However, there are times when advice is important. The type of advice that we will want is, let's say your car is making a really funny noise, and it's getting louder and louder, and it's really starting to worry you, so you take it into the mechanic. You don't want the mechanic to come out and say something like, oh, I know it's really worrying you that your car is making this noise. I can tell that, this is stressing you, and, I'll do everything that I can to help you feel better. And you're going, the only thing I want to know is what's wrong with my car and how much is it going to cost to fix it, right? We have an expert dealing with a car, we hope, and that person is giving us a diagnosis. We want to know, let's get right to the point, what's the deal? But human beings, we don't operate like cars. We don't want a person to automatically volunteer what they think is best for us. And so what we want to do instead, and where it becomes important, is brainstorming with the person. We can provide people information. Information's very important. Sometimes you may know something that somebody doesn't know, but rather than assuming that they don't know and just telling them, it's very frustrating when somebody comes and they start telling you a whole long thing and you go, I know, I'm aware of that. Well, I just read this article and da-da-da. Well, yeah, I heard that on the news too. We don't need the person to just keep kind of pushing something at us. But if we have information, everybody's got different information, that can be really useful. And that's where we start with the person and say, well, what have you thought about doing? What are some of the goals you've set? The person says, I haven't thought about it. Well, let's think about it now. Rather than pushing our story at them. That's not going to make them happy. So my first acronym here is CARE. I know that's the thing that we always want to do with other people. We want to care for them, not necessarily as caregivers, but in a way of communicating with them, being able to be available to them, and that our presence is a gift and not something that they dread. A person that you say, well, why don't we get together today? And they're like, I don't know about that. Versus the person that always is helpful and that you look forward to seeing because their presence is a gift to us. So in our acronym, the first thing we want to do, want to help a person become calm. What is the worst way to keep from bringing someone to being calm? How many of you would react well when you're very emotional and there's something really troubling you or there's something really causing you discomfort and the person says to you, calm down? What's the big deal? Calm down. That's a good way to get a person to not calm down and to get them to get more angry and more frustrated and feel less listened to and less understood. It's a big mistake that people make a lot, and instead of doing that, we just listen to them pour out the emotional part. And how do you do that? Well, you ask the person. You say, well, what happened? Open-ended question. What's going on? What is the issue that you're dealing with today? And very important, we don't judge the issue, because sometimes we do that, don't mean to, but to us it may not seem like a big deal. You say, well, I was coming home from the mall and I got a flat tire. And you say, well, okay, you got AAA, you call them. Yeah, did they change the tire? Yeah. Why are you so upset? What's the big deal? Well, I've got that baby tire on now and I'm supposed to go out to Arizona tomorrow and I can't drive this car on that baby tire. And now I got to go and buy a new tire. Well, there's a lot of places that sell tires. Why don't you just go buy a tire? Well, it's not that simple. You're supposed to buy them in pairs. And, I have an SUV. They're not cheap. And I just spent, a whole lot of money on things for the house. And I really can't afford that. Well, maybe you should just budget better. How do you think that conversation is going to go? It doesn't go well. It does not go well. Instead, we say, tell me all about it. and oh gosh, that's so frustrating that you got a flat tire, only a couple miles from home. And yeah, those SUV tires, they're expensive. Right now, money is tight. That's very unfortunate. Totally different response. If we can do that, we just ask them, what's going on? Next thing is how we respond. Do we respond with compassion? Compassion and empathy are really the two things that we use the most in communication. And it may sound kind of funny because, why do we have to always be compassionate and empathetic? But if we're not, people, they're not going to continue to share with us if they don't feel that we're hearing what they're saying, we care what they're saying, we want to do whatever we can do to be of service. And a lot of times, instead, we fall into the advice category. Oh, you need tires. I've gone to that American Tire. They're great. You've got one. They're right over here, and I think that's the one you should go to. I said, well, I have a tire place that I go to and get my free rotations and all that stuff already. But we jump to conclusions a lot of times. And what we want to do is the E. We want to help to empower that person. How do you help to empower people? Just by hearing them, by caring about what they have to say, by being with them in a way that they feel that caring rather than us trying to tell them, oh, I love you so much, you're just so wonderful, you're just my best friend, and we don't treat them that way. Empowerment has a lot of components, but it's the strongest. So when we want to help calm a person, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so in all my years in nursing, we were always to empower the patient. That is a tricky art, because we are all advice givers. And so, can you give us some examples of empowerment that we might use with, say, what you might have used with people at the crisis center, or what you might have?
Well, one of the things would be, like for us, one of the things that comes up, people will call and they'll say, I've got, I'm the youngest in the family and my family is always telling me what to do. It's very frustrating, and right now I just want to buy a car. I want to buy a good used car. Or what's more difficult in the medical field, you're dealing with a lot of things where they're going to get told, this is the medication the doctor's prescribed. We need to give it to you right now. This is what needs to happen right now. This is when your meals are going to come. This is what food that you're going to get. And what empowers the person is to say, well, how can I make this more comfortable for you? Just taking that moment to make sure that they've got their bed adjusted right, making sure that any needs that they have. Sometimes I had a friend who very much of a caffeine addict, and she was in a nursing home, and she would smell the coffee because the employees would be brewing the coffee all the time. And a nurse would come in and she'd say, is there any way I can get a cup of coffee? And they'd say, no, that's not, it's not here on your diet. It wasn't that she'd been told she couldn't have caffeine, it just wasn't what was set up. And there's this one person who was very compassionate, and she said, I can tell you really like coffee. I'm not going to give it to you at night because it might keep you awake. And, my friend kind of laughed because she said, no, I'm addicted to coffee. It won't keep me awake. But she would bring her a cup of coffee every day. And she'd just go into the employee lounge, get a cup, bring it in, let her drink the cup of coffee. She drank it black, so that was simple. And that meant so much to my friend. She was in there for about 3 months, and she said, "That woman was such a blessing. She saved my life." She said, that was the one thing I looked forward to every day, that she was going to bring me that cup of coffee. It was small, but it was just giving into something that was important to her, and that this compassionate person knew that it was important to her. Very small thing, but I would say that empowering somebody is just paying attention. Sometimes, especially with patients, they can be complaining. They're in pain, they're uncomfortable, nobody really wants to be in the hospital. But just to see through that and have that compassion and have that recognition. I think that's a big part of what empowerment is, recognizing what the person really needs, what they're really looking for. We tend, a lot of times in communication, we don't necessarily articulate very well what we really need and want. What we'll talk about more what we want than what the big picture of it is. And empowerment is just letting the person have some of what they want, that it's important to them, and to pay attention to what they're trying to tell us. So in calming, the first thing is how we speak. Now, everybody speaks differently. I'm known for having kind of a soft voice. It's sometimes a real problem and sometimes helpful, but to speak slowly, to speak gently, to sort of bring your mood into what the person is in. If somebody is feeling sad, it really doesn't help to come in and say, "Good morning, what a beautiful day, have you seen the sky?" That's really doesn't calm the person down. It actually, if they're feeling kind of depressed, it depresses them more, and that they'll say, "Well, I don't see it that way." So calming the person is kind of match where they're at. If they're kind of speaking softly, having a little difficulty getting the words out, then we do that. We just, kind of bring your voice down. And when we answer the phone, if some of the counselors are very enthusiastic, and they'll answer the phone, and they'll say, "New Hope Crisis Center, this is Penny. How are you today?" And I tell them, "No." Put this guy back on. That's not what we want to do. If the person on the phone, answers the phone, and, we say who we are, "Good morning, this is the New Hope Crisis Center. This is Counselor Louise speaking." And they say, "Oh, Louise, hi." And their way of responding is kind of slow, kind of low. I'm not going to come back and say, "Well, tell me what's going on." I'm going to say, "Well, hi. Why don't you tell me what's going on today?" So we try to match. We try to start out matching, and then we can kind of bring them up in that calmness. When we're face to face, it's important. I like this picture because in this one, I think of the man on the left being the one that's like the counselor. The one on the right who's got her legs crossed and she's got her little, notebook, she's the one that has the issue, because we want our body to be open towards the person and to lean forward towards them. It shows caring, and that helps to calm somebody. If you have a situation where somebody's very angry, it's important how we address them, how we come to them. And this picture is good, the way that, he's sitting forward, he's showing interest, she's doing the talking, and that we stay in a relaxed mode. If they rev up and they get stressed and they get angry, we get calmer. They get louder, we get softer, because they're going to tend to come down to where we are. And if we were to respond the way that they do, you know, they start out and they say, well, what's going on today? Oh, I've had a lousy day. You know, you're probably not going to help me. We literally get people that before we've even spoken to them, they say, I don't know why I'm bothering to call you. You're not going to be able to help me anyway. It's like, you know, well, you know, tell me what's going on. So we stay calm no matter what when we're working with somebody. And that can be very hard sometimes. We also have to take our time. So why that is important to know ahead of time is to not put ourselves in a situation where, you know, say you're going to go to be with someone or be with a group, and you know that you have something at 2 o'clock. And, you know, it's really, you probably need to spend a couple of hours with the person, and you make the appointment to see him at 1 o'clock. But you know that at 2 o'clock you have to go pick up your father at the hospital. That's not a good idea. You know, to make sure you have enough time so that you can stay relaxed. It's very hard to stay relaxed when we know that we're coming on a deadline and we're not going to make it. That comes through really fast. We'll start getting a little agitated. We'll be sort of pushing the person. You know, they're trying to articulate something and it's sort of long, and it's kind of, you know, we're wanting to say, you know, well, that's okay. I don't really need to know that. Let's just move over to here. And they can feel that, you know, you're not 100% focused on them because you got something else that's distracting you. One of the things, too, and I'm sure people in this room have the compassion to know, mobile phones. Now, it's fine to have your mobile phone. Our counselors have their phones there with them. But, you know, as far as to answer the phone, or the other thing, you know, we think when we put it on vibrate, that's okay. Well, I find, you know, when someone puts their phone on vibrate and they can't answer the phone, you know, they're on the hotline phone, and their little phone is like, you know, and if you're with somebody and that's happening and they're hearing that, that's not going to be relaxing for them. That's going to be stressing them. That's going to be, you know, it's a distraction. So what I do with my phone, I put it on silent, and I'm like, let it go to voicemail, you know. The person that I am with is the person I am with, and we need to let ourselves be 100% with the person or with the group, with the individuals that, you know, this is their time, and not, you know. Now, there's always exceptions. You might have a family member that's in the hospital, or a baby that's going to be born any minute in the family, and it might be really important. Best thing to do that is tell the person that you're with, you know, I'm really excited to get together with you today and to be able to be with you. But just so you know, if my phone goes on vibrate, you know, my dad's in the hospital, and he's going to be okay, but, you know, I have to stay in touch. That way they understand what's going on. So that, all of that to keep the person calm, very important, especially since I work in mental health. When you're coming with someone who's dealing with a mental health issue, if we're not calm, they're not going to be calm. I appreciate nowadays Orange County Police Departments are now being trained actually in college classes on a lot of mental health things. And they are so different now than like 10 years ago. I've seen when they've had to come into a situation on, believe it or not, on Christ Cathedral campus has these situations come up. And the way they come, they're very calm, they're very gentle. You know, the big thing is whether or not a person has a weapon. That is a change game for them. But if basically they're just acting out or they're just, bothering somebody, they'll come up very calmly. There are usually two of them. One will stay back. One will come up and say, hey, buddy, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. And they'll sit down with them. They'll take time with them. Very proud to see that change because... Ah, this is not...
Yeah, the volume is not high.
Okay.
Do you think the microphone might work better?
The handheld is gone. Yeah, I don't know why I can't get this to sit where it belongs. Sorry about that. Anyway, to approach people calmly and to stay calm, and we're kind of modeling behavior, and that helps a lot. That if we are approaching a person and working with a person and being with a person in the way that we want them to be able to be, it's a lot better to model it than it is to try to tell them, If they see that, they'll calm down. Okay, when we're dealing with people face to face, it's always important that we assess the situation. Now, today we live in a very different world, and sadly, we need to be aware of safety. We need to be aware of any situation that we're in. So when we're coming to talk with someone, if they seem to be angry, if they've just come out of an argument, and that happens, they'll be talking with somebody else, and you come into the situation, and then they turn around and they're like, "What do you want?" And say, "Well, I've come for our appointment. I'm here." Oh, okay. Well, we have to assess what's going on. How are they feeling? What has just occurred? We say we do something that's called a feeling reflection, which is where we can see what it is that they're feeling. Someone who's agitated, I would say anger is the one emotion that's really easy to identify. Even if a person's trying to act like everything's okay. So when we come into a situation with the person, if we can tell they've been crying, if we can tell that there's just an agitation there, they're kind of worked up, those kinds of things, we need to assess, how is this situation? Is this something that could become dangerous? Is this something where the person, they're really in a sad mood, and it's really a place to sit down and not be concerned with what the agenda is, but let's find out what's going on with this person. So there are different... Yes.
Greg is suggesting that we have a break so he can adjust the volume. It's really hard for us.
Can we find out if we can get the hand mic back again? This, it's not staying on.
No, it's not staying. When you get it close to your mouth, it's really easy to hear.
Yeah, it keeps flipping off my ear.
Try to adjust it, and then I'll look for the hand.
You can try, but, yeah, our guy already tried to do that, and it just doesn't stay on there.
Just let me go. I'll go.
Yeah, he took the hand mic, I don't know why. Because I could just
We're
pick that
just
up.
adjusting, trying to get the volume adjusted. Is anybody having difficulty hearing?
It's not really volume, this is not staying. So, Let's see if he can give us the hand mic. Yeah, because I can.
Would you like some water?
What's that? Oh, that's what they're concerned about. Yeah, thanks. But,
We have water.
all right, thanks. Okay, is this better? All right, we'll just go with this. I think what I'll do. Yeah.
On a handheld anyway?
Yeah, that's probably better. That's better. Yeah. Easier to be centered. Thanks, Greg. Okay, let's try this again. They're trying to tape as well, so I'll try to get this right. Okay. We live in a time when we need to know if danger is present. And sometimes people will walk into a situation and you don't know what's going on. You know, you're talking with someone and somebody walks up and you don't know them. So we really have to be able to assess the situation that we're in. It can be something as simple as a person who's in the reception area of the church, or it can be, in fact, I've seen some interesting encounters in Christ Cathedral where, someone's up doing the readings, and someone, I can remember one person, this young man who was sitting in the pews, and it was a woman who was doing the readings, and he had a bunch of papers in his hand, and he quietly walked up, came up the side, and walked over to the lectern, and he says to her, "It's my turn now." And she's like confused, doesn't really know what's going on because she hadn't finished, and she stepped down, and he got up, and he started reading what was in his papers. It had nothing to do with the readings for Mass. And everybody sat there and went, huh? Including the priest, who he ended up being the one who had to handle the situation. And that was actually, I don't know how many of you know Father Christopher Smith, lovely man, but he had to deal with it because nobody else knew what was going on. So when weird things come up, we have to look at it and assess the situation. Is this just somebody just wandering in? Is this someone that could possibly be dangerous? If somebody starts doing verbal threats, we need to take that seriously. And that can be somebody we know. It can be someone that we don't know. But on the other side, emotionally, we also have to pay attention to when someone seems very depressed. And so many people suffer with different types of depression, and such issue with suicide and suicidal thoughts. And, you know, it comes to me as people are in the Walking with Moms group that, you know, someone could be not happy about having a baby and become depressed, and to really pay attention to that, because what people who have depression do very well is they mask it. You know, how are you? You seem kind of sad today. No, I'm fine, it's good. But if their face isn't telling you that, and their body language isn't telling you that, and their level of participation isn't telling you that, then we really need to talk to them about that and ask some pretty clear questions. You know, you seem to be depressed today. No, I'm fine. Are you having suicidal thoughts? People don't want to ever say that to somebody, but it's a question that we have to ask, and that we don't ask enough of someone. You know, it's a life-saving question. So, all right, going back to, we can go on to this next one. You do ask them. You ask them immediately if you have any idea that that's going on. We'll go into that a little bit more. So going back to our open questions, what's going on? Tell me more about what happened. When did this begin? Some of the questions that we have. If we feel that a person is unusually down, you know, someone that most of the time they're seem pretty happy, they seem pretty contented, and you see a change, you see a big change. It's really important that we don't ignore that. Sometimes when a person's trying to mask something, we know they're trying to mask something, and we kind of let them do it because we don't want to be invading their privacy. But when it comes to something like depression, or something like where it could be suicidal thinking, that could be very unfortunate way to go. What we want to do instead is to just come out with the, you know, tell me what's going on. And you know, it's hard to, you know, they can say, oh, nothing's going on. You say, well, you seem different today. You seem like something is off. We really want to get a conversation started with them, even if our purpose with being with them is not about that. And if we don't do that, we can end up, you know, losing somebody. Sometimes, too, it may not be as dire as that. It can be, you know, there's things going on at home. There are issues that they're trying to deal with, many things. And if you just take the time to ask, and to ask more than once, and say, you know, I'm not trying to pry into your life, but I just feel that something is causing you pain today. And, you know, if you want to talk about that, I'm here to listen. Most people will take advantage of that, because most other people aren't going to ask that. They're not going to take that time to, you know, push into what's happening. And it's understandable, because we don't want to pry, we don't want people to get upset with us. But depression and anger are two emotions that I think we really have to, we will sense those more than others, and we really have to find out what's at the bottom of that. If we don't, a person can fall into a deeper depression, or they can go into more anger. That anger can turn into something deadly, something violent. You know, anger really can't be repressed very well. Even if the person's not going to turn around and become aggressive or become dangerous, by turning anger inside, it can do a lot of harm to their health. And one of the definitions of depression is anger turned inward. So when someone is angry about something and they don't do anything about it and they suppress it, that can actually cause them to go into a depression. So those are some of the things we just want to pay attention. We want to look beyond what the person is saying. So often we say things that they're superficial, and we kind of do that on purpose. If someone's asking us how things are going, most of the time, unless it's a very best friend or it's a sister or someone you're really close to, and you say, well, how are things going in your life right now? Well, I'll tell you the truth, it's pretty crummy. Most people aren't going to do that. They're going to say, well, hanging in there, getting along, doing okay. I consider those responses need follow-up, because if you're just hanging in there, it doesn't seem like you're living your best life. So that's where my concept is. We want to know the person's story, and people's stories change every day. And I don't want to know their life story. I'd say, oh, I was born on a farm in Iowa in 19, no, that's not the story. The story is, what's your story today? What's going on in your life today? What's happening today? What's causing the person who normally smiles not to smile? What causes the person when you're walking into the room and they're dabbing their eyes and say, are you okay? And they say, oh, allergies, these allergies are so bad. And they're trying to hide the sadness. Or the person that is just late. They're supposed to come and meet with you, and they're late. They're late constantly, and they weren't at the beginning. At the beginning, they were excited, and they came, and they really wanted to be involved in whatever it is we're doing. And now it's like every time they have either a reason not to come, or they just come and they don't interact. And the tendency is that we just let them be that way. We don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. We don't want them to think that we're thinking negatively of them. And, whatever's going on inside of them is not being addressed. So we just want to be able to give them that empathy and that sympathy. And the best way that we do it is by what they're sending to us in terms of the tone of their voice, in terms of the look on their face, that we try to identify the feeling that we're reading of that person. You just sound really sad today. Tell me what's going on. When I first saw you come in this morning, I saw you were crying. Well, I wasn't crying. Yeah, I think something's going on. Why don't you tell me what's happening? We just press a little bit. We're not being rude, we're not being mean, but we're just trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. Yeah.
What you said is that when you seem depressed today, so it's asking about. So the question asking, do you have suicidal thoughts? Does that give them more of a relief that they're being asked that? Is that the psychology?
That's a perfect question, because there is a myth that I hear often, where a person believes that if we bring up the thought of suicide, that the person is then going to think of suicide. And to me, that it's not what you're going to put on your list. You don't get up on Saturday morning and say, well, maybe I'll go down to the beach today. I probably should clean out the garage. Oh, I think I should do some yard work. I guess I have to do that. And the person seems, kind of down, and you say, gosh, are you having suicidal thoughts? They're not going to say, you know what, I didn't have that on my list. You've got a pen? How silly. if a person is having suicidal thoughts, it is a great relief to someone actually asking it, because most of the time, the way we respond to somebody bringing up suicide, not meaning intentionally to be unhelpful, but let's say that, you know, families having breakfast, if people really sit around tables anymore, it come down, and the 17-year-old son comes down, and he sits down at the table, and he kind of sighs, and you say, well, what's going on, Charlie? And he says, you know, I'm feeling really down. I don't know that I want to go on living. Well, most of the time, the reaction is not going to be, oh, Charlie, tell us what's going on. What's causing you to think this way? What's happening in your life that's making you so sad? Most of the time, the response is going to be, Charlie, you have so much to live for. Why do you say that? I don't ever want to hear you say that again. That is not something we do in this family. That is not a good thing to think about. That's going to push the person away. It's going to send the message, I can't talk to anybody about this. If I talk to them about it, they're going to give me a hard time, or they're going to, send me away somewhere. And so often, that's the way the loved ones end up, because they don't want to hear it. It's a very troubling thing to hear, especially if it's your child, especially if it's your family member. You don't want to hear that the person wants to die. But if we leave them with that and don't open it up to say, tell me what's happening. How did you get to this point? What kinds of things you've been dealing with? And let them talk about what it is. You don't have to ask them a bunch of questions. Just say, tell me what's going on. And if they try to push that away and say, oh, not much, well, you're having those feelings, that's serious. I really would like to know what's bringing you to this point. And if we are open and sincere with the person, they're much more likely to share that story. They're much more likely to tell us what's happening. The interesting thing is that when we get into a real conversation with somebody, which in my terms is heart to heart, we're really caring, we're really feeling compassionate, we're giving the time. What happens is the energy of the other person comes up. In fact, I had a teacher of mine that back when I was first teaching, doing classes, and she said, I have a trick when people get tired. And you can tell, when you're losing your audience and their eyes are going and they're nodding off in a 2 o'clock afternoon class. And she said, what I do is I'll come up with a question and I'll say, turn to the person next to you and ask them this question. And immediately the energy in the room comes up. People start talking and they get into conversation and they have this talking point in common and they start to share. And she says, then what's hard is getting them to come back to me. It's like, okay, time's up. But we get energy from each other. We get energy from people taking that time and really conversing with us. We don't get energy, with superficial stuff. You just, let's talk about what color you think you want to, what color car you want to buy or something. That's not going to get it anywhere. But, if you get something that the person is interested in, and when you ask a person, are you having suicidal thoughts, the truth of the matter is they're going to tell you the truth. If they're not, they're going to say, oh, no, it's not that bad. We have a lot of people call us and they'll say, my husband's in heaven and I just want to go and be with him. I just don't want to be here by myself. Are you having suicidal thoughts? No, nothing like that. I don't believe in that. No, it's not like that. I just miss him so much. I wish I could see him. They'll clear the air right away. No. The person who says, yeah, it's so sad without him. There's nobody to talk to, and I just miss those conversations, and I miss having, roll over in the night and there's nothing but a pillow there, and it's so sad. People that are grieving, we really want to pay attention to the depth of their grief. And that's another thing we have to be very responsive to, and address the feelings that we're seeing. My question for the audience when it comes to grief counseling, which is important to be responding to, what is it that all of us say, or most of us say, when a friend or a loved one or someone we know loses a family member or spouse? We go to the funeral. What is it that we're most likely to say when we go up to speak to the person who has the loss? Sorry for your loss. Okay. Now, I give people credit for, number one, that they go to the funeral. There are a lot of people that they're like, oh, I really liked Ben a lot, but I just can't sit through it. It's just too sad. There are people that go and they don't go up and talk to the person because they don't know what to say. Or there are people that maybe colleagues, co-workers, that kind of thing. I remember a woman who lost her husband. We lived in Cubicleville in that time. Her cubicle was right by the men's and women's bathroom. The easiest way to get to it was to go by her desk. And I watched when she came back to work as people, instead of going this way to the restroom, they would go all the way around to avoid her desk. And it was the saddest thing because they didn't know what to say. It wasn't that they didn't like her or they didn't want to get into conversation. They just didn't know what to say. That's where feeling reflections are huge. You go up and say something like, I'm so sad for you. I know that, Ben being gone, it's a huge hole in your heart. Just something where you're getting to the feeling, I know it's so sad that, your son died in that car accident. He was too young, and it's just impossible for you to be able to accept that loss. Things like that.
Yeah, because just a friend, he lost his wife, and he expressed that he did not like, he was avoiding the people coming towards him to say, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry. Because he felt like he didn't like that people be like sorry for him. So he was just like the opposite effect.
And the thing is about the words "I'm sorry," they have a place. If you bump into somebody in the hall and you don't say "I'm sorry," that's rude. If you borrow somebody's car and you get a scratch on the car and you say, "Oh, I'm really sorry that I scratched the car," your responsibility, yes, you're sorry. But when somebody dies, it's so often people will respond. You say, "I'm sorry," and they'll say, "Well, it wasn't your fault," And it seems so out of place, It wasn't your fault that Barry had a heart attack. Well, of course it wasn't my fault. Then why am I saying I'm sorry? Because I don't know what else to say. Our culture doesn't really, it doesn't really tell us how we're supposed to deal with that. And really all we have to do is name the feeling that we believe the person is expressing, the sorrow. This is a really sad day for you. I know that, the next few months are going to be especially hard. The other thing that we say, and we mean it, but it never really helps, is if you need anything, call me. Okay. Well, how often does the person do it? They might if they're your sister or your brother, but somebody coming to the funeral and saying, "Listen, if you need anything, give me a call." They don't. Grieving people aren't going to reach out to people that they're not real close to most of the time. And what's so much better is if we can name something. There was a story that was reprinted in the Reader's Digest of all things, that was called "He Came to Shine the Shoes," and it was a story back from the 50s of a man who showed up at a home after a death had occurred, after a husband had died, and he came. This was also in the days when we all wore leather shoes, and they would they'd get dull. You know, you'd have to clean them. And he showed up the morning of the funeral and said, "I've come to clean your family's shoes." And the wife is like, "What's that about?" And he said, "Well, you know, I know when you're going to go to that funeral, you're going to wear your Sunday's best, and everybody's going to have to get out their good shoes, and I want to make sure that they look really nice for the funeral." It was just something he thought of as something that he could do. And the woman was so, you know, it was a friend, he was like a neighbor, but, you know, not like a best friend. And she was so taken about it, she wrote his story and sent it to Reader's Digest, and they published it. Very simple thing. And, you know, this is the reason people send casseroles and that kind of thing. We don't do that as much anymore. But, you know, I think what happens in our society is we get kind of paralyzed. You know, you send a card or send an e-card or, you know, maybe make a phone call, but then you don't really know what's okay to do. You don't want to interfere. And what happens a lot of times is the grieving person, especially if it's a spouse and they're now living alone, they may be just sitting there by themselves, really literally with nobody to talk to. And the only reason I know that is they're calling New Hope. That's where they talk. They call up and say, I just want to hear his name. I just want to hear her name. That's another thing, and people are afraid to bring up the person. You know, they'll go to visit and not even, you know, say the person's name, because that's going to make Mary feel so sad if I bring up Bobby. Well, Mary's already sad, you know. Mary would do well to have a moment to talk about that person and to talk about what she's going through. And really that's all we're doing. We're trying to give people opportunities to express themselves. So I'm going to move on to, talked about responding, listening to the story, empathizing, reflecting, summarizing. Talked about empowering. Here's some of the things we were answering that question. Where'd it go? Empowering, treating the person with respect, providing information instead of advice, people making their own decisions. We help a person to make their decision, not try to press them into ours. Supporting action steps, that's one I didn't talk about. When we're talking with someone about what can you do, and we're helping them with brainstorming and that kind of thing, and they say, you know, I'm going to do that tomorrow morning. First thing in the morning, I'm going to take this step, that we follow up with that, you know, and say, hi, you know, I know this morning you were going to call, you know, this employer, how'd that go, you know, or you were going to see about, you know, getting your resume completed. Do you need any help with that? Those kinds of things. But to let them decide, you know, is today the day they're really going to do it? Do they really want our help? Do they really need help? Supporting those action steps, though, when a person takes the tiniest step, to really encourage them and say, you know, I'm just so glad that you were able to follow through and do this one thing. Well, I'm supposed to do 5 things. It's okay, you did the first step, that's the hardest one. So, you know, maybe tomorrow you'll do the second step. You know, it's encouragement versus how come you didn't do that? You know, I thought you were going to do all 4, which we don't want to ever do. And then there's this concept of approximate behavior. Anybody ever heard that concept? Rewarding approximate behavior. It's used with children, and it's good with children because children very often aren't going to get things exactly right. But if you tell them, I want to make sure that you're going to be safe, and here are the things I want to make sure you do, and then they do half of it, we reward them for what they did right and say, it's really great. You made sure that you didn't cross that busy street. You waited for the crossing guard. You did these things. The only thing is that then I heard that you crossed the other street that's really busy. And I just want you to think about, if this street isn't safe, then maybe that street isn't safe either. But, we start by complimenting them, and we do that with adults. It works with adults too, that if you just do 1 out of 4 things, I do that with myself at home. I make lists of, this is what I'm going to do this weekend, and then I check off my lists, and sometimes, I have a list of 8 things and I've done 3. And I'm like, okay, I did those 3. Tomorrow's Sunday, maybe tomorrow afternoon I'll do, the rest of them. But that is part of what helps empower them. So then we go on to abiding. Yes, ma'am. Perfect time to take a break because we're going into the next little section. So let's do that. How many minutes do you want there? 10? 10 minutes?
How many, 15 minutes?
15 minutes? Yeah.
15 minutes, hopefully the coffee is still hot.
15 minutes. Yeah, comment.
Thank you. I have a comment, and my comment is I work with people that have drug addiction or people that are families of drug addicts, and I have learned, and it took a long time, to focus on the positive. So I don't say, how are you doing, what's going on? I tell them, one day you're going to make a great speaker for me. You've gone through so much. One day you're going to make a great speaker for me. And I focus on the positive, and I think it's paying off. So.
That's part of empowerment, and that's always a good thing. When you see something in a person, that we've seen many people that, and even if it's kind of buried under a whole lot, but whatever it is, you can see in a person to do that and say, you've got this. Everyone has something that's worthwhile, and that's a very good technique. Definitely part of empowering. Okay, go ahead and go, everybody.